Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the Sports Insight with your host Alamdar Khan. And yes, as you know, we give you information about sports from all across the globe. You guys can surely reach out to us on our social media handle, which is @ Indus News Sports. That basically works both for Twitter and for Instagram. But anyways, we'll go to the headlines first. And yes, Manchester United manages to draw against Fulham 1-1 on Wednesday. And yes, from the world of NBA, Indiana Pacers win against Charlotte Hornets 144-117 on the play-in game. And yes, from the world of tennis, Andy Murray will kick off his grass court campaign at the Nottingham Open. And yes, from the world of rugby, Sam Simons' hat-trick breaks Premiership record for the tries in a season. And yes, so those were the headlines, and surely we'll be discussing Premier League, how actually Manchester United manages to draw against Fulham, and the major upset for Manchester City losing against Brighton, because Brighton has not won a single match against them. But anyways, to discuss more in-depth analysis of the world of football, we have with us Lawrence Connery all the way from the UK. Lawrence, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. It's
Great.
to be here.
So Lawrence, we'll start off with the first match. Yes, Manchester United managing to draw against Fulham 1-1 on Wednesday. Not to forget that, 10,000 spectators were finally out there ensuring that, they're supporting their team, and obviously they managed to see that goal from Cavani. But how do you see this developing in the long run, not only for Manchester United, but obviously for the spectators?
Yeah, it's great to get fans back in, and I think, as the vaccination rolls out, we'll get back to full crowds within the year. I mean, the game itself, very much a nothing to play for game at the end of season. I think only Cavani came away with any credit. And Solskjaer is going to be disappointed. Man United have the Europa League Cup final coming up against Villarreal, and there weren't many players that staked a claim for a place in that team. I think Cavani will start. De Gea come back in goals after young Henderson being at fault for a couple of goals against Liverpool. But a very pedestrian display by Man United, and Fulham didn't offer much, barring the 76th minute. Brian goes in at the back post and levels the game. And Man United were unable to find a winner after that.
Yes, interestingly, and if we see the other match that I would like to talk about would be Brighton defeating Manchester City. If we look back at Manchester City's performance overall in the Premier League, I think they have been one of the finest, and they're looking forward to have that Champions League final as well. So how much impact would this defeat against Brighton 3-2 in the Premier League would impact them as a team?
I mean, Pep's going to be really unhappy, but I think, the game had everything. City 1-up early doors, then a man sent off in 10 minutes, but managed to get a second early in the second half, and Brighton come back with 3 goals. Obviously, playing with 10 men for such a long time,
right?
It had a tiring effect in Man City. But I think Pep's really unhappy. After Goigodan scoring in 2 minutes, Canelo off in 10, Phil Foden doubles the lead in 48 minutes. You would expect Pep's team to see the match out, even with only 10 men. But there was something of a collapse. Brighton getting goals in 50, 72 and 76 minutes to run out. And it must be said, deserved winners at the end of the day. Pep's going to be unhappy, but I suppose we can excuse them one slip up in a season, I suppose.
I think that was probably one of the reasons they lost one of the guys for injury, and not to forget that the possession with Manchester City in the entire match was 37%. Are they prepared to, face Chelsea in the final of the Champions League? That's one of the major questions that comes out of concern for Manchester City. Not to forget that if we look into FA Cup, Chelsea lost, the FA Cup, and Leicester City won. So there's going to be a major turn of events in terms of, when these two English teams face each other in the Champions League final.
Yeah, I think Pep will have his team. He'll have Man City prepped well and ready to go for it. As long as they keep 11 men on the pitch, I don't see Chelsea presenting them with any problems. Tuchel's come in from PSG, taking over managing Chelsea. He's done well, but as you said, Brendan Rodgers, Leicester City put them to the sword in the cup final. They're going to be on a bit of a downer. I think the Champions League is going to reside with Man City. I think Pep will have them up and they will win 2 or 3-0.
Right. And if we look into, obviously, the defeat of Chelsea, if we talk about, obviously, the Thomas Tuchel-led Chelsea team, they managed to still lose the FA Cup against Leicester City. So if we look into the overall perspective, for instance, if we talk about how Man City lost against Brighton, would surely shake them. But then, obviously, Chelsea losing against Leicester City in the FA Cup, don't you think that would also shake their confidence?
Yeah, definitely. Chelsea's going to be on a downer from that. You know, Brendan Rodgers, former Celtic manager, is doing wonders with Leicester. He's won a trophy with them, destroyed Chelsea, you know, in the final, although there was a goal rolled off by VAR, but rightly so. Chelsea, this is all they've got this season. City, you know, the champions of England. They'll put this 3-2 defeat down to lose it, get a man sent off 10 minutes in. They'll write that off to experience, and I fully expect him to be full of confidence, Man City. But for the final, Chelsea not so much so. It's their chance of silverware, and I don't see them defeating Man City. I think Guardiola has Thomas Tuchel's measure as a manager, and I think his City team are going to win this rather comfortably.
Right. But if we actually look into the situation, Lawrence, for the moment right now, everybody is vouching for Manchester City to begin with. But yes, Chelsea, if we look back at how they managed to get where they are at the current moment, it's surely because one of the major reasons for that is obviously the leadership of Thomas Tuchel. So who knows that this match ends up being, because one of the, I was speaking to one of the correspondents and he said that, we're looking at a possible penalty kick in the end because both of them are going to strive so hard. They would want to bring it to that point. And if it comes to that point, we all know how difficult it is when it comes to the penalty shootout.
Yeah, anyone can win in penalties. It's anyone's game. You wouldn't like to predict that. It depends which keeper's in form and which penalty kick takers can keep their nerve. But if it goes to penalties, I'm going to be surprised. I just think, Pep Guardiola, this is what he wants to do with Man City. He wants to win this season's Champions League. And I think he has the players at his disposal to do it.
Absolutely.
As good as Chelsea are.
Yeah, let's hope that match that we're actually looking at, I think a lot of fans out there are looking at the performance and looking at this match, which is obviously going to be in Lisbon. Anyways, I would want to talk about one more match in terms of Premier League. The goals from Patrick and Robert actually moved Leeds up by 8th position. So how do you see them now making these moves, now ensuring that, because if you look into the victory of Leeds for the past 3 consecutive matches, they're winning. So how much impact would it be for them?
Listen, this is great by Marco Battisella's Leeds. They'll be only the 15th team to finish in the top 9th, after being promoted to the Premier League. They have been outstanding this season, one of the bright sparks in the Premier League. Bamford in 73, and then the second goal by Roberts deep into injury time, 5 minutes into injury time, rounded off, a convincing 2-0 win. It had to be said, it didn't really look like Southampton were ever going to take anything from the game, despite being rode on by some 8,000 fans. I think Leeds have surprised everyone with how well they've done. They've got West Brom, right. And I fully expect him to continue their winning ways, Leeds. And next season, I would expect him to invest heavily, and perhaps be pushing for the top 6.
So if we look at Leeds winning this match, I think those 8,000 fans and supporters out there in the field, now we know how much the energy can impact a team's performance. So how do you see this in the long run? Because we've been having this entire COVID breakdown, and the stadiums were empty and the players wanted this enthusiasm. So Leeds taking that victory 2-0 obviously will surely in the long run is going to be super interesting having those supporters back.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great to have the supporters back. From a Southampton point of view, the supporters weren't able to inspire them to victory. But, the players must have enjoyed it, as the fans. And and people watching the game. It's better to have fans at the game than kind of piped in fan sound. I think within the year we'll be back to full stadiums if the vaccination programme keeps going ahead. And, football without supporters is nothing. It is all about the fans, whether you're watching on TV or in the ground. But I think you can't beat being in the ground with your friends and watching football. And God willing, we're going to be back to that soon.
Right. I would also want to switch over a bit towards the Scottish League. And, I'd want to talk about Celtics, because you've been major support for Celtics. So I would want to know how they managed to draw against the Hibs on 15th of May, because the entire perspective is I'd also want to know the in-depth analysis on the standings of the current Scottish League.
Okay, so the rip-roaring, free-scoring, never-boring Glasgow Celtic unfortunately failed up to that, to live up to that, and a 0-0 draw away to Hibs. As yet, no fans in the stadiums in Scotland.
Right.
Celtic did have the ball in the net from a free kick, but unfortunately the referee ordered a retake as he was unhappy with the Hibs wall at the time. So it was an end-of-season game, the last game of the season, nothing to play for either team. Celtic tried a couple of the younger players, Adam Montgomery at left-back, come out with really credible performance. And the much-lauded Karamoko Dembele, the youngest player to play for Celtic, again, getting a run out on the wing. It looked promising, and we hope to see more from him next season. But Celtic finished trophyless and second in the league for the first time in 9 years.
Right.
This was their captain, Scott Brown's last game, the most decorated player in world football in the 21st century. And to go out in a draw had to be something of a disappointment from him. But
right.
I think Celtic have really missed the fans in the ground.
But in terms of, if we talk about Celtic itself, we talk about the clubs on the top right now is obviously Rangers. And I think Celtic and Rangers have this old rivalry in terms of the football experiences. Obviously Rangers winning the last three and obviously with 102 points on the top, whereas Celtic is on the second with 77 points. How far do you see Celtic will have to go to make their comeback on the top in the long run?
So Celtic are on the lookout for a new manager. We've been managerless for almost 80 days now. It's strongly rumoured that it's going to be Eddie Howe, the former Brighton manager. So we expect the new manager to be announced this week at some point. Scott Brown, after 16 trophy-laden years, the Celtic 9-in-a-row captain, he won 4 trebles in a row prior to this season. He's going to be a huge miss for Celtic. So without doubt, Celtic are going to have to dip into the transfer fund and make some big signings to replace it. Scott Brown, they've also got Odsonne Edouard, former PSG forward, who's rumoured to be moving on this summer, who will need to be replaced also. So it's going to be a close season where we expect Celtic to be extremely active in the transfer market as they want to re-establish themselves as the top team in Scotland.
Right. Let's hope, Lawrence, all fits into place. Thank you so very much for being a part of the show and discussing the world of football with us.
Thanks.
So yes, that was Lawrence. Obviously, he gave an in-depth analysis not only on the Premier League, but we also talked about the Champions League final that's upcoming your way very soon. Not to forget, we also talked a bit about the Scottish League. Anyways, what we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and once we're back from the break, we'll discuss more sports. So see you guys after the break. Yes, welcome back from the break. And yes, before the break, that was the world of football. But as discussed, we obviously talk more about sports from all across the globe. Anyways, I'll talk about the play-in tournament, a big tournament that's currently underway in the world of NBA. And to discuss the in-depth analysis, we have with us Matthew, all the way from Rochester. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Great, great. So Matthew, we'll start off with the first match. Obviously, it's an interesting tournament with regards to how things are establishing and a few interesting games that have actually been also lined up. But we'll start off with the first game that actually took place when Pacers actually managed to win against the Hornets 144 to 117. And I think that was the Eastern Conference first play-in game.
Yeah, that was the 9-10 game, and it was kind of a sad, surprising result. It was sad for the Charlotte Hornets because they've had really a good season for them. They've been hurt by injuries, but that's a team that for a while has struggled to have any excitement or optimism. And they really had a good season this year until the injuries just took their toll. But they just couldn't hit a three-pointer in that game. Whereas Indiana has been a completely unpredictable team all year. They're up, they're down. That continues. They came into this game with 3 starters out with injuries. There's been speculation that their coach doesn't get along with their players. So, of course, Indiana blows out the Hornets. They couldn't miss a three-pointer. Everybody seemed to play brilliantly for them. That's really been the story of their team all year, up and down.
Yeah, and even though if you look into the Eastern Conference in standing, they're close by. They're on the 9th and the 10th. But this tournament, the play-in tournament, obviously is going to be a test of will for the fact that, a lot of players, as you've discussed, are going through that injury. So I think it's surely going to be a turn of events for a lot of teams who, people have a lot of hopes from. So how do you see people play, or the players or the coaches manage all of this plan according to the play-ins or the play-outs that actually, or the playoffs that actually come in the long run? Because the injuries obviously impact the team as a whole, in terms of their performances.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's the first year of this new tournament. I think teams are taking it pretty seriously. And Indiana was a team that came in and seemed like they could have easily just limped to a loss and been happy to be done with their season. And you saw they were very motivated to keep on playing. I think in the future, you will see maybe more teams balancing, I don't want to get my best player hurt, because even if Indiana does get to the playoffs after this tournament, they're not going to get anywhere. They're not going to beat one of the best teams. And I don't know in the future if teams will risk health just to sneak in and lose. But because this year it's so new, I think everybody who's into it is really into it.
And overall, in terms of if we looking at the performances, obviously by the Pacers, not to forget that Indiana needs one more win to secure a 6th consecutive playoff appearance. So how does it develop, even though you've already predicted in terms of that, even if they go in the long run, they will not make it to that mark which they're supposed to. But for instance, if they eventually come up to that point, only because of maybe chances with regards to if players from the other teams, because that also does impact the whole entire gameplay.
Yeah, I don't think Indiana would need to feel badly because they have right now about as many injuries as anybody. And at this point of the year, every single team probably is dealing with some sort of injury. So
True.
You can't quantify your luck. If you run into a team and they're more hurt than you are, you take advantage of it in the moment because that's going to be you at some point also. I think it'll be very interesting to see the rest of the league gets a week off while all these play-in tournament games are happening. So it would seem as if the other teams should be able to get healthy. It's these lower teams that have to keep playing and keep trying just to get in. I worry about that, especially this year, because with COVID, the schedule has been a bit more condensed than usual. So there's been more injuries that you see from overexertion. We'll see a few days from now how this tournament has affected that.
True. Anyways, would want to jump over to the second match that we want to discuss. Obviously, the Boston Celtics defeating Washington Wizards 118-100. And the Boston Celtics were one of the NBA's worst team, to be honest, in terms of this month's performance. So how do you see instantaneous changes that are happening in the play-in games?
I think the play-in game reveals, particularly in this case of Boston and Washington, what kind of stands out about the character of each team. And one reason why a lot of teams, despite, as you said correctly, Boston has struggled for a while. Right. But one reason nobody wants to play them is what you saw last night, which is they have a player in Jason Tatum who can score 50 points any night. And they have another player in Kemba Walker who can score 30. And that's exactly what they did last night. And that's what it took to win. It's why you don't want to need one game against Boston. The problem for Boston is, can they keep this up over 6 or 7 games? That's been more of a problem. Whereas the same thing for Washington. Washington has been one of the hottest teams in the league for a while. But as you saw last night, when it comes down to just one game, Washington didn't get much from Russell Westbrook, and Bradley Beal did not shoot well. Yeah. And if those two players don't shoot well, Washington really can't do anything. So when you reduce it all to one game, over the last month, you're right, Washington's played much better than Boston for a long time.
Right.
But when you just boil it down to a single game, Boston had the best player on the floor, and that was the difference last night. That was the whole difference.
And absolutely, and Bradley Beal actually only managed to score like 22 of the entire game. The point is, if their main players are unable to perform in play-ins or even if playoffs, the point is ultimately the teams want to get there to the point where they can actually utilize those key players so that the team can go further up.
Mm-hmm. Beal's been injured for a while. He's been struggling with a hamstring injury. I think your point is a good one and an interesting one to consider, that when teams get to this position, they want to do everything they can to win and to advance. But I do wonder sometimes with the league, because the play-in tournament is exciting because there's more teams involved in it, but you're pulling in some of the weaker. A team like Washington in the past, maybe, or Indiana, would not make it, and they have so many flaws.
Right.
That I think the play-in tournament is working. It's exciting, but I'll be very interested to see how those teams do when they get up against some of the better teams in the playoffs that are waiting for them.
Right. And talking about the better teams, I'm just so excited to look forward to what's your take on the upcoming match, the Lakers versus the Warriors. I think this is going to be one interesting game that I'd love to see and want your point of view on it.
Yeah, everyone's excited about this game. Everyone will be watching this game. I think it's very important that Golden State gets off to a good start. The Lakers are a much bigger team than the Warriors are. And if they can get off to a lead, the Lakers are very good when they get a lead with their size and their strength. It's just kind of like wearing teams down. But if Golden State, especially Steph Curry, can get off to a hot start, then I think it's a very dangerous game for Los Angeles. I expect the Lakers to win because they're bigger and because LeBron James is LeBron James. But
True.
If you see Golden State in the game at the half, if it's even close at halftime,
Right.
That's the worst nightmare for the Lakers.
Right. So it's pretty much like Steph Curry versus LeBron James in terms of a whole perspective or a whole package, if you look at it that way.
It will be. The sad thing for Steph is that LeBron will still have a second star in Anthony Davis, and Golden State really doesn't. Golden State has been a surprisingly good defensive team this year. I don't know how much that'll play in against LA because they're a little different than a lot of teams, but it's a very exciting matchup. And anytime you have, again, one game against Steph Curry, you can't feel good about your chances because he's having probably the best year of his career so far.
True. Well, anyways, thank you, Matthew, for being a part of the show and discussing the in-depth analysis on the playing games for NBA. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Great. So looking at the entire perspective of the play-in tournament, yes, the interesting game that is lined up is Lakers versus the Warriors, and we'll surely give you an update about it. Once it happens, it's surely going to be Steph Curry versus LeBron James. But yes, it surely will be an interesting take, but we'll wait to see the results. Anyways, we'll quickly have a word on the next news, which is from the world of tennis. Yes, we're talking about Andy Murray, who is actually going to kick off his grass court campaign in Nottingham Open. And not to forget, he was going through an injury, a groin injury, which he was facing for a while, and then he had to go through that recovery phase. But anyways, he will play a non-stop grass court this June. Before that, he was just going for his recovery. He was trying to fix him up. But now I think things are slowly and gradually shaping up for him as his performance. But not to forget that, in the long run, he was also practicing with Djokovic. If we look back into time a few weeks ago, and this was exactly the same thing that he wanted. He wanted to be perfect at the glass court, and I think now is the time for him to come and perform and see where exactly can this go. And not to forget that, the event actually starts in June. So looking forward on seeing that and covering that for you guys. Anyways, I'll quickly jump over to the world of rugby. Yes, talking about rugby, Exeter swept aside London Irish 31-12 at the Brentford Stadium. And looking at the Brentford Stadium, obviously, slowly and gradually things are pacing up for the world of rugby. Not only that, because of the fact that overall the COVID-19 situation is slightly settling down. The teams are still out there now. We have a little bit of risk, but obviously there was not really any attendance in this particular show. But the interesting thing that actually happened was Simon actually scored a hat-trick in this game. He plundered the 17th, 18th, and the 19th tries of the season as his the hat-trick that's actually broken his previous premiership milestone of 17. But anyways, this was an interesting take, and it took Simon's just 7 minutes to equal the record. So Simon struck twice inside the opening quarter. But anyways, this was pretty much it from the world of sports. If you're gonna reach out to us, you surely can on our social media handle, which is @Indus News Sports. They're basically both for Instagram and Twitter. Till then, take good care of yourself and bye-bye.